The New York Jets came into this offseason with a lot of questions to answer. However, after a very good free agency class, I believe it's time to give the New York Jets a lot of credit. So in case you guys have not been keeping in touch with the New York Jets, they've made quite a bunch of underrated moves, including a couple big time moves. Today, we're going to talk about all those moves and what I think the outlook of the New York Jets looks like moving forward. And we are going to begin by discussing their most recent free agency class. Now, they brought in several key players like Mike Williams, Tyron Smith, John Simpson, and many others. We're going to go through each one separately and kind of give you guys my opinion on that move. We'll start off with the most recent signing in Mike Williams, who signed a one-year deal reportedly worth up to $15 million. If healthy, Mike Williams will be a great number 2 option next to Garrett Wilson. If injured, then there's some more questions about this signing. Good thing for them, it's only a one-year deal, and if it doesn't work out, then you just move on and potentially draft a receiver next year. But for what it means for them next year is you finally give Aaron Rodgers a legitimate second weapon next to Garrett Wilson. Last year, offense really struggled last year, not only because of Zach Wilson, but also because of the fact that their number 2 wide receiver was Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb, and those guys just aren't the same level player as a Mike Williams. If Mike Williams is what we think he can be, a big target, 6'4", 50-50 ball winner, that really is going to provide something that this team has just not had. Their next big signing, and I say big, but this one wasn't as big as the Mike Williams one, is Javon Kinlaw signing a one-year deal worth $7.25 million with $6.9 billion guaranteed. Kinlaw, who was a first-round pick back in 2020, was somewhat disappointing for the San Francisco 49ers. He's battled some injuries and just hasn't really lived up to the potential that we think he can be. However, he's made some flashy plays here and there. He had 3.5 sacks last year, and for the most part, I think there is some talent still there. Next to a guy like Quinnen Williams, he's going to be able to play that defensive tackle 2 role, similar to kind of how he was able to do in San Francisco. Playing in a similar scheme is also going to continue to have him get more comfortable and get better. Hopefully, with the New York Jets, they can maybe fix some of his problems and make him a potent starter next to Quinnen Williams, who can hopefully get them 5+ sacks. Then they brought in Tyrod Taylor to be their backup quarterback on a 2-year deal worth $12 million. I, for starters, love this move. Tyrod Taylor is a very good backup quarterback, one of the more competent guys you can put out there just in case Aaron Rodgers gets injured. We kind of all know the deal about Zach Wilson, and at least up to this point, he's still on the roster, but it's very clear that he is likely going to get traded. So this team went out there and got a competent backup quarterback so that if, for whatever reason, Rodgers is to go out for a couple games, Tyrod Taylor may not be able to win them games necessarily, but he's also not just going to throw away games like a Zach Wilson would. But now we get to the offensive line, and this is really where we get our big plays. And the big additions along the offensive line were Morgan Moses, John Simpson, and Tyron Smith. We'll start off with Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses because they're very similar offensive tackles where they're both older, both have some injury concerns. However, when healthy, they're fantastic. We'll begin with Tyron Smith. He is obviously one of the greatest left tackles who has played in the recent years. Under Dallas, he was a perennial All-Pro and Pro Bowl level player. Despite some injuries kind of hurting his last couple of seasons, when healthy, he's still the best tackle in the league, or at least one of. You put him with Aaron Rodgers and hopefully he stays healthy. That's going to be a left tackle position that you have zero concerns with moving forward. Then you have Morgan Moses, who is a veteran player who's been around the league for quite some time. He may not be a Trent Williams or Tyron Smith-like player, but he's also somebody who you're not scared is going to give up 10 sacks in a season. Is he a top 10 tackle in this league? Probably not. However, you will take him 10 times out of 10 over what they had last year. This was an offensive tackle class last year for the New York Jets that was god-awful. Now you actually have 2 competent to even 2 very good tackles on this team. The nice thing about both these deals is that they're not long-term. Morgan Moses was traded to the Jets before he signed a 3-year contract back in 2022. So he still has, I think, 2 years left on his contract, which means that if it doesn't work out, you move off of him and you're fine. Tyron Smith, only a 1-year deal. By the way, $6 million is a super good contract for him. Then there's John Simpson, who agreed to a 2-year deal with a contract worth a maximum value of $18 million. Is he as good as Robert Hunt or Jonah Jackson? No. However, with what they were able to do with the amount of money, it makes a ton of sense. He's one of those inexpensive options who's a very competent starter in the NFL. Is he the greatest player ever? No. But he's going to be a nice fill-in player at a position where they really could have used a quality player like a John Simpson. Now your guard duo is John Simpson and hopefully Elijah Vera Tucker if he stays healthy. You have a pretty solid offensive line, and all things considered, this is actually going to be one of the better units in the NFL if they're somehow able to stay healthy. healthy. And that is a lot of their free agency moves. Now, one common theme that I've talked about for a lot of these players is health. And obviously last year, that was the one reason why the Jets were unable to actually win a lot of games last year. Aaron Rodgers got injured and basically tanked their season. Now you got a lot of other guys who are also older, injury prone, and it's a little concerning. Mike Williams, Tyron Smith, now Aaron Rodgers. If they stay healthy, things are looking bright. If they get injured, it's going to be another 7-win season. But now when we look towards the future of this team, we can start asking ourselves, what holes does this team still have? And despite all the praise I'm giving them now, they do still have a couple key things I would like to see them address, maybe in the draft or hopefully with their leftover cap that they still have. So the number one thing that I would want this team to look to address would be something in the safety room. Right now, they only have 3 true safeties on the roster, and those are Chuck Clark, Tony Adams, and Jarek Bernard-Converse. And none of those guys really, in my opinion, inspire me for that safety room. Good thing is you already have DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, not to mention you also have Michael Carter II, so your secondary is fine overall. That being said, your safety room is desperately in need of work. Fortunately, this is not a draft class that is full of a bunch of safety studs. The number one safety, in my opinion, is Tyler Rubin from Minnesota. However, with this team not having a second-round pick, it does somewhat handicap their options for that safety position. I will say there are still a couple of really good safeties available in the open market, so if they're able to restructure some deals or maybe find a quality player for about $8 to $9 million, I wouldn't be surprised if they went out there and did that. Like, I know Justin Simmons is available, but he might cost them a little bit more than $10 million, so if they can get Justin Simmons, then that's a legit move. Again, the secondary is already good. Sauce Gardner is good enough by himself to man down an entire side of a defense. You really just need that safety over the top. Chuck Clark, as good as he is not a full-time starter, and if he is the full-time starter at safety for them, I would have some concerns. Outside of the safety room, maybe you would potentially like to add something else on the defensive line next to Jermaine Johnson. Right now, their other defensive end is going to be John Franklin Myers, and he is a very good player, and you're also probably hoping that Will McDonald can really turn it up next year. And even though I don't think that's necessarily a massive hole for them, if a guy like a Dallas Turner or Jared Verse is available at their pick, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets were to go out there and take them. The next thing I would look to address is something in that receiver 3 position. Right now, your options are Alan Lazard and Xavier Gibson, and I'm sorry, I'm just not very inspired by either of those guys. Xavier Gibson does have some potential, but I wouldn't want him to be my wide receiver 3 if it was an option. So if there is a guy like a Roma Dunze or hell, even a Brian Thomas Jr. available with my pick, I would heavily consider those guys. You might also want to look into the tight end position as well. Right now, your starter is Tyler Conklin, who is a competent tight end who can do some decent things run blocking and pass catching wise. However, with my beliefs that Brock Bowers will somehow fall in the draft, if Brock Bowers is also available with your first round pick, I think that would also be a home run hit. But outside of that, those are really your only glaring problems, especially as we look forward to next year. Now, long term, you ideally would probably want to find a backup quarterback who's going to be your long-term answer. It's obvious that Zach Wilson isn't that guy. So maybe if with their 3rd round pick, if they were to go out there and get some quarterback in this year's draft, I wouldn't hate that, to be honest with you. If a guy like Spencer Rattler happens to be available in the 3rd round with their pick, I wouldn't be too shocked if they were to go out there and do that to give a predecessor to Aaron Rodgers. That being said, I also believe this team will probably be really aggressive next year to get the backup quarterback of the future. So just kind of keep that in mind. You're also probably going to want to find some tackle play because, as I mentioned, both Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith are not on long-term contracts. So unless you just want to keep giving these guys 1-year contracts every single year, you probably want to find that future left tackle or right tackle, especially with the age of both Tyron and Morgan. They probably would like to find a long-term answer at that position. Luckily for them, this is a loaded draft class. You can even wait to the 3rd round to find a quality tackle of the future. But if they want to be aggressive with the 10th overall pick, I wouldn't be shocked if they were to go out there and get a guy like a Tyrese Fuaga, an Olu Fashanu, or a Troy Fatanu. Of those 3 guys, I think Olu Fashanu has the highest upside to be the predecessor to a Tyron Smith. However, Troy Fatanu does have that versatility, so it's really your pick of whoever you want. But again, as I mentioned, this team doesn't really have a ton of holes. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, now Mike Williams, Tyron Smith, and Morgan Moses to go along with, of course, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever in Aaron Rodgers. Defensively, Jermaine Johnson and hopefully Will McDonald will be able to pick up the slack that is left behind of what Bryce Huff was. Hopefully Solomon Thomas and Javon Kinlaw can really produce competent production as the number 2 defensive tackle. Your linebacking room with CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams is still very solid. Jay Reader, Sauce Gardner, fantastic. Now go find your safety of the future, and I think this team is really looking bright. But all in all, overall, what is my prediction for this Jets team? It's hard to say that now as time goes on after the free agency class is officially done with, and after all the sort of stuff that comes down with the draft and the rest of free agency, then I can probably give you guys a better answer as to a full-on prediction. Do I think this Jets team, if healthy, is a playoff team? I think there's a very good chance. Because unlike a team like the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins, who are two teams in their division, the Jets are getting better actively, whereas the Bills and the Dolphins are getting worse and worse every single day, it feels like. So am I saying they're going to win the division? Pump the brakes. I want to see how the rest of the offseason goes. But based off how their offseason has started, I would say they're having one of the best offseasons in the entire AFC. But you guys tell me, do you guys think this Jets team makes it to the playoffs next year? Because as it sits right now, it's looking pretty good. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. But I love you guys. Peace.